Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the special webinar, Behind the Scenes, the Making of Her Story Too. My name is Irean Swan from Kleinden's PC, and thank you all for joining us for the special presentation in honor of Women's History Month. I'm a shareholder at Kleinden's PC, and my practice focuses on professional liability defense, especially in the area of legal malpractice or defending attorneys, and complex high-stakes business litigation. I always jokingly tell my family and friends that people call us when they need effective attorneys to help them find solutions. We will be recording this webinar, and each of our attendees should be muted. If you are not, then we don't know what happened. Technology is, maybe not my strong suit. But please submit any questions you may have using the questions feature on your control panel. If you just kind of hover your mouse down on the bottom, you'll see kind of the questions panel pop up. Feel free to ask questions at any time throughout this presentation, and we will do our best to answer your questions during the live presentation. There may be user error involved on my end, so just bear with us and be patient. Without further delay, let's turn over to our esteemed panelists today. We're honored today to have my partners, Heather Rosing and Teresa Beck, and Yendelela Neely Holston, a partner at Kilpatrick Townsend, join us today. Ladies, I will go in alphabetical order and ask you all to please introduce yourselves. I'm going to start with Teresa Beck.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here today to celebrate Women's History Month. I am a managing shareholder for Kleinden's PC. I manage the Nevada and Arizona offices from here in San Diego and also practice in California. I co-chair the firm's DEIB committee and immediate past president of the National Conference of Women's Bar Associations, and I serve on the book committee of the Women's Advocate Committee of the section of litigation for the ABA. And that's where her story came from.
Yeah. And then we'll move on to Yendelela.
Hi, Yendelela Neely Holston. I am a partner with and the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Kilpatrick, Townsend, and Stockton. I am based in Atlanta. My practice focuses on labor and employment, so representing employers against their employees. I was so excited to contribute to the book and excited to be a part of this panel and to meet everyone. And the opinions expressed today are not the opinions of Kilpatrick, Townsend, and Stockton, but yet the opinions of Yendelela.
And last but not least, our fearless leader here at Kleinden's, Heather Rosing.
Thank you, Irene. It's really exciting to be here today, especially with these wonderful co-panelists and our wonderful moderator. I'm the CEO of Kleinden's PC. I'm also the chair of the Complex Litigation and Professional Liability Defense Practice Group and the Ethics and Risk Management Practice Group. Like Irene, I engage in the law of lawyering, both in litigation and advisory capacities, state bar defense, etc. I've been with the firm now, believe it or not, 28 years, I believe, coming up on 30 years. My whole career, I started here as a law clerk. My background is bar association work, president of the San Diego County Bar, vice president of the State Bar, inaugural president of the California Lawyers Association, president of 2 bar foundations with the social justice bent, and now I'm doing some exciting work at the ABA. And Teresa asked me, like she asked many people, to write the story. Here's my story. I printed it out, and I just think this is an amazing endeavor that came through to fruition. And I'm really glad that we're celebrating it today in the context of Women's History Month.
Well, thank you, ladies, all for being here with us today. And Heather, I'm glad you brought up the point with Teresa. So, one question I have is, one way that women can make history is by being connected, right? So I'll start with you, Heather, because you mentioned Teresa. How did you become involved with the book? And, who connected you to, become involved with this book? And how did you end up making those connections?
Well, I think the story probably begins with becoming connected with Teresa. So Teresa is a mover and shaker in the San Diego legal community and with women's issues statewide and countrywide. She holds a lot of really impressive positions, but the most impressive thing of all is her really heartfelt dedication to advancing women in the practice of law. And that's how we met, basically through the San Diego Lawyers Club, the bar community's women's causes. Both of us are passionate about that. And we just got talking one day, and we talked about Teresa joining our firm here at Kleinden's PC. And I'll always remember one thing that Teresa said to me, as we were talking about her coming over here. Her concerns weren't money. Her concerns weren't, how her office or how big it would be, or, really anything, more material like that. What she cared about was being part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And she said, I want to come to a firm where I can make a difference within the firm. And I said, great, you can co-chair our DEI committee along with Natalie Vance if you join us. And Natalie cleared that. And so Teresa did join us, and she became the co-chair of our DEI committee. And a lot of this webinar today is just one of many things that we do through our committee. Irene is also an active committee member. So that connection between Teresa and I through women's causes led to her coming to the firm, and then ultimately led to her one day asking if I would write this piece, which is about flexibility for women in the workplace and how flexibility has led to advancement. So Teresa is a connector, and I applaud her for that.
Yeah. So I'm going to pivot over to Yendelela on the same question, because you and I, before this webinar started, we're just talking about flexibility and being able to, do the webinar and do a lot of things from home. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with this book?
So I did not know Teresa before this book. And so what definitely wasn't the connection. I am so excited to have been connected with Teresa through this book. We've had some great conversations. I believe it may be because I am the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer of Kilpatrick Townsend. I got an email asking me to write about diversity in the legal profession. And I jumped at the opportunity, kind of pivoted a bit from the ask and wrote a more personal bent on it. But was invited to speak about what it means, diversity and inclusion in the legal profession. Had no idea at the time, because this was 2 years ago, how much things would change, what the Supreme Court would do, all that we would be dealing with today. But think I hopefully wrote a timely piece from a personal perspective.
And you most certainly did. So last but not least, Teresa, how did you first become connected with this book? I understand you were involved with an earlier iteration of this book, actually.
I was, and I thought I had a picture of it somewhere in here, but I don't see it. Her story, number one, was a product of the Women Advocate Committee's, at the time it was called Work-Life Balance, and then it got changed to Work-Life Management, which, was a conscious change in the words, because we felt like it's really not balance, which also suggests, kind of teetering, and we don't like that. It's more managing, your work and your life outside of work. So we did Her Story 1 because at the time we were hearing questions from younger women about, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to work and have a family? And some people in my family are saying I shouldn't. And some of my friends are saying I won't be able to, or it's going to be too hard. And we knew a whole network of women who were doing it in a variety of ways, not just having families, but having outside interests that took a lot of their extra time, and were able to do it, and they were happy. We were seeing a lot of stories about women attorneys who weren't so happy with the choices that they made, but we knew a lot of women who were very happy with their choices. And of course, we'd like to see women succeed more at the highest levels of the profession, but there's still many of us that were happy and wanted to share those stories. So that was Her Story 1. And I'm trying to remember how I even, I've always been a member of the ABA. Felt like it was something lawyers should do, is join, a national organization of lawyers and support them. And I'm a litigator, so the Women Advocate Committee jumped right out at me to join. And it's funny because I remember back in the day, we'd have these phone calls and you'd be talking to women all over the country. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I'm on the phone right now women from Florida and New York and, Oregon and Nebraska. And of course, technology has really quickly changed how much we're able to, not only be on the phone, but actually see each other. And so that's where I got connected with all these women. They wanted to do a book. They wanted to do it on these work-life management issues. And then we were asked to talk about another book. And what would the topic be? And the consensus among the women on the book committee was that, hey, there's a lot of obstacles in the profession. Why don't we write about it? There was a little bit of pushback because the word obstacles is kind of negative.
Right.
And so, we had to kind of deal with the reality that there are obstacles, and we do want to do kind of a guide of how we can overcome. So the little subtitle is The Resilient Woman Lawyer's Guide to Conquering Obstacles. So we tried to put a positive spin in order to, make everybody happy, and then began the process of, what are the obstacles and what do we want this book to cover? And that's how we ended up reaching out to a lot of women like Yendelela. And I believe, Yendelela, it was your involvement in Atlanta with people like Shayna Steinfeld with the Women's Bar in Atlanta that led to connecting with you. So lots of connections, right? Maybe even some you didn't realize.
Yeah. It's funny because, in law school, right, people always tell you, make connections, build those connections. They'll last you a lifetime, especially as women lawyers. You find the mentors who, will take you places, right? Like take you beyond your, careers. And, I'm sure for all of us, right, we've all had those instances where we found those mentors. Teresa, I want to stay on you for just a brief moment, actually. I want to get a little bit of, I want you to tell the attendees of this webinar really briefly, what was your topic for the second part of her story? And how did you end up choosing that specific topic?
Well, so one of the nice things about being a co-editor is that you get a lot of flexibility with what you do want to write about. So I could have chosen, probably just about anything, but one of my passions, I just finished serving as president of the National Conference of Women's Bar Associations, is NCWBA for short, their Good Guys program. And good in Good Guys stands for Guys Overcoming Obstacles to Diversity. And it's a program about engaging more male leaders in DEIB efforts to become, really activists for DEIB, and not so much saying, hey, I'm not getting in their way, so I'm good, but actually being active and helping overcome the issues women face. So I decided to do my piece on the Good Guys program and how it came about, and where it's headed. So
Yeah.
that's how I chose.
Can you tell us a little bit about where it is headed? Because, personally, right, I feel like we have a lot of good guys at our office who are very supportive of the women leaders, women associates, women attorneys around them. But where do you think Good Guys is headed?
Well, we do have a lot of good guys, and to the point that we have a women's affinity group, and there's guys that are members, which
We
I
have a
think
lot of men as members. This is true.
yeah, I think that's super cool. I think that there are still a lot of male leaders in the profession that don't realize that increasing diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in their workplaces, whether it's corporate or a law firm, even a small business, increases employee satisfaction, increases revenue. There's some studies that show really, my friend Cheryl Axelrod calls it eye-popping. That's not my word, it's her word. But if I use it 3 times, I get to steal it. But she says eye-popping, statistics that show like how much greater firms that are more diverse do than those that are not. So there's still a message that needs to get out and get around. And so I think the future is doing more, but using more male voices to expand the program so that the guys take more responsibility for it, is where I see it heading.
Absolutely. And I'll pivot over to Yendelela. Tell us a little bit, I think this is a great pivot over to you to tell us a little bit about your topic and how you chose that topic.
Happily. Want to piggyback off of something Teresa said about the eye-popping statistics. And for me, they're eye-popping about how firms do differently, because the way we started talking about diversity so many decades ago, there was a subtext of not having enoughness, right? Like lowering your standards. So we're going to let in women. They're not good enough, but we're going to let them in because they're women. And I think that subtext has done us a disservice because it was completely and patently false. And so people's eyes pop, not realizing that, yes, if you let in a diverse group of people, these are all very qualified people. You had been artificially narrowing your pipeline in a way to deprive you of the best work product. And now when you don't, you will succeed. And so I think today we find ourselves dealing with the well-meaning, early diversity work, but still that was grounded in some subtext of, hey, let's give these people a chance versus, no, let's open up the doors to everyone. And they're not less qualified at all. They have just been kept out for no good reason.
Right.
And so, but that kind of takes me to my topic, which was about being a Black woman practicing. And so my chapter is called Mandatory Magic because it was written in a time where all you could hear was like Black girl magic, like Stacey Abrams, Black girl magic. This was before Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was on the Supreme Court, and they were considering her. And so some people were talking about her in terms of Black girl magic, and some people were using that pretext of not qualified based on the fact that they were looking at having a Black woman as a justice. And so somehow in so doing, you were automatically selecting somebody that wasn't qualified, despite the fact that she is very qualified and even more qualified than some people who had just been put on the court. But there's that subtext that has always existed in this space when we're talking about it that we don't call out as we move along. And so for me, that has resulted in what I call mandatory magic, particularly for Black women, where we have to perform and do things at superhuman levels. And it's become expected, but it's tiring and it's hard. And so I end with saying, we just want to be human. Like, I want to be able to show up and do what everybody else does. I don't want to have to do 5 times as much as everyone else, then say, oh my gosh, you're doing so much. How are you doing it? But then we're also expecting you to do it.
I agree with you on that. Yeah. It's interesting, but that was a very poignant point I found from Teresa, the partner track. Yeah, that was a very poignant. I don't know if either you, Heather, Yendelela, you've seen Partner Track or read the book. It's a show on Netflix now, but that was a very poignant point that I took from Partner Track. And it was funny because I was watching it with my husband. He's just like, he just didn't get it. And I was sitting there and I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, that's what I've been doing is, working twice as hard so that, somebody on the opposite side, right, can see me as, oh, she's qualified, right? Like hitting the minimum, right? My husband's not diverse. And he looked at it, he's like, I don't get it. And then it took me to have a long, tough conversation to explain to me, you don't understand. It's twice as hard. It's 5 times as hard, as you said, right? 5 times as hard for a woman, especially a diverse woman, for somebody else to see her as, oh, you're just qualified. And it's like, no. Like you shouldn't see us as working 5 times as hard just to reach the same level, and I'm so glad that you wrote that piece because I think, it's, I actually want to show that to my husband, it makes, it's show him to have him understand, oh, I didn't realize that's what you are dealing with. I didn't realize that's how you feel. So I really appreciate that actually. Heather, I want to talk a little bit about your piece because Yendelela and I were just joking about your arbitration trial appearance setup during during COVID.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot of fun too. I just have to say, the whole thing about, I'll talk about my piece in 1 second, but, about women having to work harder just to get to the same spot. And sometimes, even that hard work doesn't put you on equal footing. When I opened up my news feed for the San Diego Union Tribune this morning, here's the headline on the San Diego Union Tribune, at least on the app. Why do men in San Diego earn almost $10,000 more than women for full-time jobs,
Oh my God.
And you would
Oh.
think, San Diego is a pretty progressive place and it's 2024, but
Right.
that's still the reality. These are women who work just as hard, but probably harder in many instances, like we're discussing, but still don't reap the same rewards. So, anybody who thinks the problems have been solved, they have not been solved. So, that's why, getting back to her story, a book like this is so important because I think it highlights, what the struggles still continue to be. And, like you said, Irene, with your husband, it gives an opportunity to educate people who may not, men in particular, who may not have these struggles on their radar screen. So anyway, that goes back to me complimenting Teresa for being a co-editor of this fabulous book. In terms of my story, I wrote it looks like I finished it on July 2nd, 2022, because that's the date on my rough draft here. And and by the way, that was the deadline. Teresa's like, today's the deadline. And I'm like, I'm almost done, Teresa. But this was, still pandemic times, right? I mean, the pandemic had been going on a while, but, the pandemic pervaded every aspect of our lives, to say the least. Certainly as the CEO of a law firm, and I was a new CEO of a law firm. I essentially became the CEO in the middle of the pandemic. Everything at work, not just my own work style and my own work schedule, but because I'm part of the whole law firm as the CEO, everything in the workplace was governed by discussions about the pandemic. So I got to thinking about it, like, what is the tie-in between the pandemic and women? And what I came up with is this. And my article is called Where to Work, Flexibility and Advancement in a New Day and Age. And I reflected back on when I was a young lawyer. And at our firm and most firms back in the 90s, that's when I started practicing law, showed up at your desk at 8 a.m. You left your desk at 6 p.m. You wore a full-blown suit every day. And, that was, and you were expected to be in on Saturdays if you were really going to prove yourself, So we actually had a system when I first started where if the phone rang on Saturdays in the law firm, it would actually ring to every desk. If somehow we had that setting, and like you were the hero if you picked up the phone at 8 a.m. on a Saturday at Clindon's PC. Anyway, we don't do that anymore for
We do
obvious
not.
reasons.
No, I was going to say we've not done that in a very long time.
But what I ultimately came up with, and I believe it is because the pandemic naturally forced certain types of flexibilities in the workplace, more unusual hours, remote working, different types of work dress, more remote appearances. We got to see what that looked like and what it looked like for women in particular. And I really believe that, the pandemic was horrific, of course, but that silver lining ended up benefiting us as women, because like we all know, many women do drop out of the workplace and the profession of law because it's too much with having children, too much with having a family, because of the pressures, because of the difficulty in becoming a partner, all the things that we're talking about. But if you have flexibility, if you can work from home, if you don't have to put on a maternity suit every day, if you are somebody who can go on a part-time schedule without being penalized, if you're somebody who doesn't have to travel all over the country for depositions, but can do it at your home, allowing you to spend more time with your family or your children, that's going to allow you to stay in the profession. That's going to give you advancement opportunities that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And I think about pregnant women. I was more pregnant than most women, and you probably wonder what that means, but I had twins and they were 14 pounds. And I had to buy these ridiculous suits at Pee in the Pod, the ones that cost like $800 and it's like a pregnancy suit and like they're horrible, they're ill-fitting. But, every day, like my husband would roll me out of bed, I'd put on this pregnancy suit, go into work. I remember somebody once said to me, that suit looks a little tight. And I had to just hold my.
Oh my God. Who
Oh
told
my
you
gosh.
that? Who told you?
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, it's a little tight. Yeah, because I'm pregnant with twins, and this is the only suit they sell.
God.
But but going to the point of that, now you don't have to be, if you're the pregnant woman, you don't have to put on the suit and roll into work. You can work from home, and you can even come back to work more quickly, because maybe, you're at home caring for your child for part of the day, and then you transition to your office and start working again. You don't have to be back Monday through Friday at your desk wearing the post-pregnancy suit. You have that flexibility. So I think COVID, silver lining, flexibility, advancement of women, I see it as a positive continuum that we're still experiencing the benefits of today.
This is true. And I want to actually highly commend Heather for that. She put that into practice, because I had a baby and was pregnant during the height of the pandemic during COVID. And I came back and I came back as if nothing changed, basically. So, I want to highly commend her for that. We did get two questions actually from our audience. So, our audience has said, I've found having the salary ranges disclosed due to California law and other states have been super helpful in negotiations, actually to know the difference, even though some ranges are pretty broad. A question that for the panelists is whether to negotiate for negotiations, right? What is their advice for somebody who's thinking about doing a job switch?
Well, if they're working for us, please come talk to us first.
They're not working for us. They're not working for us.
Please come talk to us first, because we can work things out.
All right.
Information is always powerful. I think Glassdoor is a great resource. I think it's great having those tools going into negotiations. So I'm not sure, and some people from our employment group might know this better. And Irene and Heather, I'm not sure if you track the disclosures, but my understanding is they're kind of broad. So I'm not sure like how helpful they really are.
Yeah.
Glassdoor, I think, really can help you drill down into details of how long you've been practicing, your area of practice, geographic, and it might get a little more helpful information for negotiating, but that's hugely powerful and important information, I think, to have when you're negotiating compensation. And not just the money, but the benefits and things like remote work that we have available at our firm, because not everybody does. And it's getting off track, but I've been hearing some people are calling people back into the office, right? And some courts were allowing us to attend remotely, and now they're saying show up in person. And it's unfortunate, because I thought we learned a lot during COVID, that it wasn't really necessary to have to travel to Los Angeles from San Diego.
Oh, you mean get on the 4:30 a.m. train?
Right.
Can I jump in? I want to jump in on what you said,
Yes.
Teresa, because I know we're getting sidetracked a little bit, but as Heather, you were talking, I was thinking, at least from my firm perspective, and several of the firms in Atlanta, people were really good with the pregnancy part of being a mother.
Yeah.
But they're still working on the mother part of being a mother and a lawyer, right? Like, I made partner on maternity leave. Like, I did not fly to our California office for my partnership interview like everyone else, because I was 4 weeks postpartum. So I took it via video conference and I just missed the smooching part of things. But it all worked out, because I think people are able to operate in that finite space of pregnancy and after delivery, and firms have struggled with the flexibility that's required to mother in practice, right?
Right.
And we were so hopeful that COVID would bring us back to it. And we were there. And I think we will see, well, I'm hopeful at least, we will see an uprising of women attorneys who say, no, I'm not going back to the other way. This works, and it allows me to be my best self and to show up in all the many ways that I need to show up for the various roles I hold in life. And you should be okay with it. Like, I'm hopeful that we will see that, and it may just be a women's revolution. But I was feeling the same way as you, Teresa, when everybody started saying, well, come back, or be here this many days out of the week, or no, you have to appear in court for this 5-minute hearing that could have really happened via the telephone.
Yeah.
It's the meme. It could have been an email.
Yeah. And I think leaders, like at our firm, we're blessed to have a female CEO that understands these issues, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we need more female CEOs. Because at our firm, the idea is what works for you. Because if it works for you to work from home, then absolutely, we can accommodate that. If a hybrid situation works, we can accommodate that. If you want to be in the office, we can accommodate that, and everything in between, right? Because life changes. It's not always going to be the same.
Yeah.
The demands are going to be different. The kids will have different issues. Your family, you might have parents that you need to take care of. There's a whole spectrum. But having the flexibility, I think, is really key. And maybe law firms still do need to hear more about it, and the court system too, unfortunately.
So we have another question, actually. How do you sell to management, actually, the types of flexibility that's required to support a pregnant attorney?
Is that another question?
Say the question one more time. How does management support a pregnant attorney? Is that the question?
How do you sell to management the types of flexibility that is required to support a pregnant attorney? Not that I'm putting Heather on the spot.
No. I mean, I've been in management in this firm a very, very long time, since I officially became involved in a board role and officer role in 2006. And before that, I had some much less glamorous management roles. I was head of like the library committee. That was a big one. The head of the AR committee. That's a real sexy one, but
important.
But important.
Right. Well, I mean, the good thing about our firm is there's never been the problem of selling that at all. When we wanted to enhance our maternity policy and then turn it into a parental leave policy, everybody was always solidly on board with that. When we decided we wanted to give the flexibility and that, when COVID hit, and then extend it permanently, so that, women in particular, but not only women, others as well, could have a certain lifestyle while still working for us. That was also an easy sell. I was really surprised, I'm a news junkie, when I started reading about the companies that are like right after the pandemic cleared up, everyone's back in the office 5 days a week. I'm like, that just isn't wise. It just isn't a good idea, because you have to assess your employees, especially the high performing ones, on a person by person basis, and maybe there's that person that would have to commute 2 hours each way, and so really you're going to have them do that. Or there's that person who, again, due to a pregnancy or a post-pregnancy situation, a childcare situation, couldn't work for you, except for the fact that, you offer the flexibility. But addressing your question more directly, I just want to share a quick story. When I joined the firm in 1996, there was only one other woman. And I'll mention her name because she's awesome. She's at the Procopio law firm, Kendra Hall. And we didn't have a parental leave policy or maternity policy. And she goes straight to the board. She told me all about this, and she's like, we need one. And, they're like, yeah, we need one. We do need this. So 1996, we got that policy. Because she was the first pregnant woman in the firm, as I understand it. Maybe there were a few before that, but I don't think so. So as you're approaching your law firms for, first of all, women should do this. They should be talking with their law firms or their agency or whatever the setting is in which you work as a woman. You should be approaching them about things like salary, maternity accommodations, childcare accommodations, because if you don't ask the questions and you don't make the suggestions, things aren't going to get better. And I would, just quickly, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but that kind of circles back to this issue of the salary ranges that you mentioned on Glassdoor. Teresa, I agree that I look at those like every day, and they're very broad. It's like 85,000 to 200,000, So what does that really tell you? And I think law firms aren't trying to be evasive with that, by the way. It's just that, they're looking to hire competent attorneys, but maybe the lower end 2-year attorney would make the 85,000, but the 30-year attorney may make the 200,000. So they're welcoming all those applicants, but it's just this broad salary range. So, but, if you as a woman, have done your careful research and you understand that, perhaps others in the community at similar type agencies or law firms are being paid more, drill down on that, get the information and approach your employer about it. We here at Kleindens, we did a whole review to make sure that we didn't have any gender discrepancies in our pay structure. But not everybody does that. And maybe the women are being underpaid just because nobody's brought it to their attention that the women are underpaid. Now you got to be careful. I'm just going to make this cautionary note because we have had a couple people who come to us and they're like, and this usually is in the interview process, like new hires, like my salary requirement is X. And X is totally out of line with the market. It has nothing to do with being a woman or a man. It's just like an unrealistic expectation, which is why you have to do your research, figure out what the community standard is, and make sure that your requests are in line with that, but not outlandish or unrealistic.
Yeah. Yendelela, I'm interested in hearing some of your thoughts actually on these issues too. I know it sounds like you also went through a pregnancy. I think you became a partner, right after you gave birth. Did you personally have a experience where you did approach for management, and how did that go? Or
So our firm has been very supportive of women and mothers. I think probably more so than a lot of our contemporaries in the Atlanta market. So it was never an issue. Our policy has always been much more generous than the law requires or than the market was offering. And so at the time it was, hey, this is how long I think I want to take. And you just tell them how many weeks, and then they say yes or no. So I said I wanted 18 weeks, I think is what I took. And so I took that time and mine was paid, whereas one of my colleagues was pregnant. Our babies are 2 weeks apart, and she wanted 6 months. No, she wanted, was it 6 months? Maybe 8 months. She wanted a very long period of time.
right.
And they were like, we will pay you for a portion of that, but then the rest of it will be unpaid. So they've always been, what do you need? Just let us know. As long as you say you're coming back, we're good with it.
Yeah.
So it's always been very helpful. There's now a more formalized policy, which is still very generous. And we've implemented a transition back into practice policy as well, so that when you're coming back from leave, you don't work a full day every day for the first couple of weeks. So you slowly transition. Like there's a plan to talk to you about taking your cases back over and making sure you have work to do when you get here. We've considered and still are working out the logistics of like milk, because that was one of my things. I just paid for my child to travel with me for the first year. So whenever I had something to do, I'd pay for him to come and my mom to watch him, so that I didn't have to worry about shipping milk. But we've talked about milk services so that you'll have that taken care of. So we've been very thoughtful about it, and we're still a flexible workplace and always have been, regardless of gender. So when I was talking about the not catching up with the working mom part of it, it was more so thinking from the profession as a whole, not for my firm. Because when my child was little, he had a desk in my office too. He had a little table and little chairs.
So
He would come to work. He had a cot for sometimes. And so we were talking about how I started out today in the office and didn't realize that there were some home things that need to be done that would not be able to get done. And so transition there. So it's been very flexible. But to Heather and Teresa's point, I think flexibility is key. And firms are best when they realize that making it easy for people to do their work results in the best work product. And I don't think that's how we as a profession have approached it for so many decades. It was, this is how we do things, and you're going to do things how we do things. And we need to start looking at it as, how can we make it conducive for you to do work? And that's like what the tech space did. They started bringing in cleaners and food and bring your dog and live here, never leave. And I'm not saying that, but they were onto something in saying that you need to make it easy for people to do their jobs.
I completely agree with you, and I completely understand. I love that Heather's nodding with you because she's my boss. On that point, right? So, we are celebrating Women's History Month this month. And, we talked a lot about, the profession, right? Especially the legal profession now for women. There's still, we're progressing in the legal profession for women, but we're not quite where we should be yet, right? Yendelela, how do you think this book and all the stories in this book fit into where women attorneys stand, right, in this profession, in 2024?
For me, I don't know if you guys like there's this running thing in me in terms of I feel seen. I feel seen. Like I think the book starts out by making you feel seen.
Yeah.
So to say I can see myself in all of these people, and then you read their bios and they have titles and positions where not only did you feel seen, but now this is the person that I can see myself being or emulating. But I think the book takes you through that journey. And I love how it starts with feeling seen, because if you don't start there and you start either with the you can do it, you lose a lot of young attorneys because they think, oh, you don't understand my struggle, you don't understand my journey, and so your approach will not land with me because it didn't start where I started. And so I love that the book starts there with, hey, we understand their challenges, we understand their obstacles, here are a number of stories and you will see yourself in one or more of them. And now let's talk about some other people that you may see yourself in and how they have made it work for them. And so I just love that about the book.
I do. Teresa and Heather, I'm a little interested if either of you have the latest statistics from either the State Bar of California or the ABA on women's progression in the profession, actually. I just saw something from the State Bar recently, but I didn't memorize it, unfortunately. But I'd love to hear both of your thoughts, right, on, what you've seen from the statistics and how, this book fits into where women attorneys stand in 2024.
Well, I don't have those statistics. I've likewise seen some publications in California and the ABA, and next webinar I'll be more prepared. I'll have the statistics. But it's slow. I mean, even if you look in San Diego, I remember when I became CEO, I looked at the at various San Diego data points about how many equity women equity partners there were in San Diego law firms, because Lawyers Club does a study. I looked at how many female managing partners or CEOs there were of the top, I think, 25 law firms, various data points. And it's still, pretty difficult data. At that time when I became the CEO, of the top 25 law firms, there were only 2 firms that had, a true female lead, us being the second. The women equity partner numbers are still, even, below 25%. So I don't know, Irene, again, the exact statistics, but the only way that we're going to boost women in private practice or in in-house positions or governmental positions, just boost women in general, is if we boost each other. I mean, it's really the only way. And, honestly, part of the reason that I became the CEO is not because I'm interested in, day-to-day management of a law firm. And that's, in fact, not what I do. Other people do that very, very well. But because, I wanted to figure out a way to advance young attorneys in general, men or women. But I did want to figure out how to help women specifically advance in the profession of law and get more women partners, out of our equity partnership. We're about as progressive as they get here at Clientons PC, but we have four women equity partners out of 14, 15. And that's like excellent, numbers, but, is it excellent enough? Of course not. Of course it isn't. So, I, think that, women sometimes need to be asked to do things. And I know this is a bit off topic from your question, Irene, but if you want a woman to become a partner in your firm, go to her and say, hey, you should consider putting yourself on the partnership track. If you want a woman to enter management in your firm, if assuming you're the a more senior person, go to the younger women and say, hey, have you considered a management spot in the firm? The same is true for judicial positions, 100%. Almost every woman I know who has succeeded in getting on the bench has a story. And then the story isn't, I independently thought of this and decided to go for it. It's always like, hey, a retiring woman judge approached me, or another woman in the legal community approached me, and I hadn't thought about it. And, now I feel supported and I'm going to do it. So, we need to be reaching out to the younger women. They don't have to be younger, though. I guess it's any women who we see as having potential for advancement in our profession. and we need to be encouraging them to be all that they can be.
That's absolutely true. And, personally, I can attest that Heather talks the talk, but she also walks the walk in that regard. Yendelela, I want to hear, kind of your thoughts, a little bit more about, how, your chapter really resonated with me, right? About where women, we have to work 5 times as hard, sometimes, especially diverse women, right? We have to work 5 times as hard just to be sometimes on equal footing with everyone else. You know, do you still see that as being an issue? And, where do you think we can go to, maybe change that, right? To change that, and have that not be the case anymore.
So I guess it's multifaceted response. One is, if the numbers tell you it's still an issue. If you look at the number of women graduating from law schools, women of color graduating from law schools, then you look at the numbers going into associate pools, and then you get up to the partnership, like the drop is like that. It's not even a slow decline.
Smaller. Yeah.
And so if we start with just the women partner numbers, 50%, over 50% of the last few years of law school graduating classes have been women. They are less than 50% of associates, and on a good day, they might be a quarter of partners, right?
Yeah.
And so that shows that it's not just naturally improving. And I believe it is Diversity Lab has a graphic about it, and it's like 50 years from now, if we continue at the rate we are, is when you'll see a number that matches the percentages, right? And so unless you're assuming that women are inferior, which I do not assume and do not believe, then there has to be something behind the scenes at play, right? That's causing this. And I think it is the way that the legal profession is set up. It was set up for us not to be a part of it. It was set up to minimize our ability to succeed. And so we have invited people into a game where the rules were set against them, right? And so I really think we should take a step back to figure out which of these rules are necessary for the practice of law and which of these rules are just the things we've always done. And so Heather pointed out one of those rules when she was talking about where you show up to do work. Like when she started, you had to be there at 8 a.m. There's no purpose for you being there at 8 a.m. Like how many clients were running to call you for the emergency issue at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning? Maybe noon, but not 8 a.m. But now you realize that that's not necessary for the practice. It's not necessary for client service. And so it was a rule that kept a lot of people from being able to succeed that actually was not necessary to their practice. And I would love to see us as a profession declare that we expect our partnerships and our associate ranks and our attorneys to be reflective of the demographics of people coming out of law schools, and then make a commitment to removing all barriers to that. Not giving people special treatment, not like giving handouts, but removing the legitimate systemic barriers to achieving that.
I love that. I really love that. That resonates along with me personally. Let's, I'm going to end here with Teresa. Teresa, I want to hear kind of your thoughts on, where this book fits in to where, women attorneys stand in the profession in 2024.
Well, I don't have any statistics either, and I would love to see Diversity Lab's study that Yendelela, you were referring to.
You mentioned some statistic at the retreat last year, right? I think
it's not last year. So NAL, National Association of Women Lawyers, does a study every year. They don't always give you these forecasts. So sometimes you can go many years before you'll get a forecast. So I want to say it was like 2016-ish, so not that long ago, that NAL did a forecast and said, based on current trends, that it wouldn't be until the year 2181 that women would reach 30% equity partners. And I don't think things have changed that much since then, but maybe there's a study that is updated and shows, greater movement. My worry was that COVID was not good for a lot of women attorneys.
Right.
That, you know, I think we lost more women to the practice despite our efforts to, you know, bring remote work. So I think there's still quite a lot of improvement that needs to be done. And it sounds like Yendelela's firm, like ours, is probably Mansfield certified. So we really have a deep commitment to looking at our numbers and increasing and ensuring that we are creating a path for a diverse group of people to fill our positions, right? We're making sure that we are considering at least 30% diverse candidates when we have positions to fill, and meeting other metrics and knowing our metrics, right? Because a lot of firms don't even like count, right? And you count what you really care about. So we're looking at those things. And I think a roadmap, or in this case, we called it a guide, a guide to overcoming obstacles, you know, is pretty cool. So women telling their stories, I think is really unlike anything else, because we can read about, you know, we can read fiction about what happens to other women in roles like ours, but, you know, actual true stories about women who have overcome a variety of obstacles, I really think does make us feel seen, but also gives us people to model, right? So I think for me, Heather is a perfect example. I came from a background where I didn't get modeled being a sponsor, because no one really sponsored me in my firm. Coming into this job like 3 years ago, I didn't really even know what that looked like, because I didn't see it. But now I see Heather doing it. She does it for me.
She does it for
She does
a
it
lot
for
of
me.
people. Yeah, we're very fortunate.
Yes, yes. And so having a place where you can tell the stories of people like Heather,
Yeah,
and Yendelela, all the other authors in the book, and encourage women like Irene to think about their stories and where they fit, I think is really important, because I think telling our stories and shedding a light on, you know, how we've dealt with things, it hasn't been, you know, a perfect path probably for any of us, right? Lots of different kinds of obstacles.
yeah.
I think is part of what we do to change things, along with things like Mansfield certification and all the other things that our DEIB committees are working on.
I love it. I love it. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. You know, are there any questions that we can answer that we haven't answered yet? Feel free everyone to add that into through the Q&A process. You
I
know,
can talk real quick about an interesting story. So there's a lot.
yeah, go ahead.
So there's a lot of amazing stories in the book, every single one,
Yeah.
every single one. So I got interviewed recently by, I think it was the ABA Journal, about the book, and they asked me to pick one. I'm like, oh, it's so hard. But Yendelela's was the one I chose, because I think it's really deep and I think enlightening. So I encourage people to get the book and read all the stories. But there's one by a woman, Diana Flynn. And Diana's story is that of a transgender lawyer who had the experience of being male in the profession and then transition and saw the difference, right? So as a male, do we say she? I'm not sure. Had the experience of people listening, right? And acknowledging ideas that were presented during meetings and giving credit. But as a female, it was totally different. And it was the same person, right?
Yeah.
So pretty interesting experience to have, to really highlight that there really is a difference, right, between how we perceive our male colleagues and how we perceive our female colleagues, and the differences that they experience in the profession, which are all things we want to conquer. But being aware is huge.
And Irene, I see that there's an open question. And since I am not with Clindus, I'm happy to respond so that nobody there gets themselves in trouble or the firm attacked by any of the conservative groups. But I personally think that the way that you continue to support DEI initiatives in light of the attacks targeting the programs is one, I don't think about your stupid attack, right? Like, first off, I think about the law. And Title VII is what applies to us, to employers.
Yeah.
And I know my DEI programs have always been compliant with Title VII. I think the analysis of the court kind of goes beyond that. I think the people doing the attacks have gone beyond that. And at the end of the day, like Title VII, Section 1981, they're going to be the ones that apply, right? Secondly, that decision was focused in the race arena, and DEI is much, much broader than race. And so what I have told to people who've cared about my opinion on this subject is that we never, ever, ever seen a law firm or even businesses go out of their way to comply with something that doesn't require them to comply with it, right? Like, never are we ever like bending over backwards to figure out how to make a law fit us that doesn't normally fit us. And so I think we should take the same approach here, especially if it's something that's important to us, that we think drives our business, that we have legitimate reasons. And there are ways to do this within the confines of the law. And I think we have been doing it within the confines of the law. And I would encourage people to continue to do it within the confines of the law. And so I have decided that I will not be afraid. If you attack me, that means I'm doing something right, but I'm also an employment lawyer, so I know how to do it legally right as well. And so I'm sure that all the other firms are thinking about that. And so if you follow a lot of these attacks, a lot of them have kind of gone off, they've fizzled out because I believe they were emboldened, but not necessarily legally sound. Those are my 2 cents.
Agreed.
Agreed. Well, with that said, I think I'm starting to get the wrap-up signal from Scott here. We have a minute left, but any closing remarks from any of our esteemed panelists here? I think
Well, I'll say, think about your story. You have a story. Each one of us has a story, and it's important. And I hope you'll all think about ways that you can share your stories to encourage other people.
and ways that you can lift up other, women and other minorities, in the profession. Well, thank you all for so much today for joining us for the behind the scenes, the making of Her Story Too. We hope you enjoy the ideas and the discussions that came out of this webinar today. And on behalf of our panelists and everybody at Clindus PC, thank you. And thank you for being here with us today. Look forward for more webinars from Clindus PC in the near future. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.